All right, my name is Jamie Copes. I'm a tutor training and digital literacy project manager at Wisconsin Literacy. And this is an overview of Northstar. Most of us are just getting started with Northstar, so hopefully you came with some questions today. And I'm going to introduce Rob Polasic from Northstar, who's going to be leading our training.
All right, good morning, everybody from right next door over here in Minnesota. I'm going to go ahead, share my screen. So as Jamie said, my name is Rob and I work for Literacy Minnesota. My primary function is I am the training director for Literacy Minnesota. So I oversee the training of volunteers and support teachers and programs in the use of volunteers throughout Minnesota. And then about 5 hours a week of my job is dedicated to doing Northstar training. And my coworker Teresa sets up these trainings, said, you know, I always give you the good programs. And I'm like, well, what are the good programs? And she said, well, the adult basic education programs. I'm like, well, libraries are good programs, but you guys are my people. We work in the same field, the same environment, work with volunteers and so forth. So we have a lot of similarities. So this is the first of 3 trainings. And so what we do is go through Northstar 3 times. So the session today would just be an overview of this is what Northstar is. And I know a lot of you have gone through the demo with Teresa and you probably have an idea of what it is, but never bad to get some review. And then we'll come back next week and talk about getting started with Northstar. In this session, we'll really look at some of the administrative tasks, like how to set up a student account, how to proctor an assessment, how to run a report, things that you might do as a teacher, an administrator, a tutor. And then the third time we'll come through and we'll look at Northstar again from the learner perspective. The learner interface is a little bit different than the teacher and admin interface. So we'll look at it from that perspective. And we'll talk about how teachers and tutors can support learners as they go through the Northstar system. So we'll go through it 3 times. And hopefully by the 3rd time, you're going to be like, yep, we know this already. That's good, because that is the goal of a training, to have you walk away feeling like you know what Northstar's about. So, as I said, today will be the overview. And our agenda pretty straightforward. We'll just do a little background about Northstar's history and its philosophy. Northstar's history really informs how it works. And so share a little bit about that. And then we'll do an overview of the main features, the standards, the assessment, the instructor-led curriculum, the self-directed online learning, the learner management system, and the reports that you can pull out. So I want to make some disclaimers before we go any further. The first is that technology is always changing. Think about how cell phones have changed in the last 10 years. Think about how computers have changed in the last 10 years. Northstar started out, I think, talking about Windows 8, and now Northstar's talking about Windows 11. So technology is always changing. Our use of technology is always changing, and Northstar is always trying to keep up with that. And therefore, Northstar is always changing as they add additional units, as they make tweaks to the product. So I guarantee probably by the end of our time together over these 3 trainings, Northstar will have changed some feature. And I'm constantly having to go in and update my slides because they've always changed something. That's the reality of life. Software isn't linear. I know some people want to know, what do you do first? What do you do second? What do you do third? Well, you could do this first and second and third, but you can also go about it this way. And so I'm going to talk about 1 or 2 ways to do something, but recognize the process is different depending upon how you're using it. As with all software, there's more than one way to do things. Okay? How do you copy and paste in Word? Well, you can highlight it, left click, highlight it. You can use copy V, you can do ... Same is true in Northstar. There are multiple ways to do things. I will highlight the most common way, but recognize there may be other ways that you choose to do it. Just you can't unintentionally break Northstar. If you have some really good hacking skills, you might be able to take it down, but you're not going to click on a button and destroy Northstar. There are lots of fail safes built in. And if you do delete something by mistake, Northstar can put it back. So really encourage you to get in there, play around with it, figure it out. You're not going to ruin it. And then the last one, even though Jamie said I'm with Northstar, I'm not technically really part of the Northstar team, which means I can talk about how amazing they are and still maintain my Minnesota modesty. So sometimes I'll say us for Northstar, sometimes I'll say we. The Northstar team is a small team of about 6 full-time equivalents, so a lot of half-time people there, so not a huge team. And every day I'm amazed by the incredible work that they do, and I'm really honored to get to be a representative of that. So just a quick background on my organization, very similar to Wisconsin Literacy in a lot of ways. We operate really on 3 levels. We do direct service, so we provide literacy instruction, digital literacy instruction, citizenship classes, high school equivalency, English language learning. We do that through the use of teachers, volunteers, and a combination of the 2. And then, as I mentioned, we provide statewide training through the Department of Education to those volunteers, and we support teachers working in adult education, encouraging them to use volunteers. And then we do national products like Northstar, English Unlocked, our English language learning product. We have some educator resources on our website. So we have sort of a grassroots level, state level, and then national and really international level. So that's really exciting to have all those pieces informing the work that we do. So start out with the mission of Northstar Digital Literacy to help individuals around the world master digital literacy skills needed for work, learn, and participate fully in daily life. And this mission is pretty similar because we just took it from what's our mission for teaching literacy, right? We teach it so that people can improve their lot in life. What's our purpose for teaching English? Same thing. What's our purpose for teaching math, right? It's not math for the sake of math. It's not reading for the sake of reading. It's not digital literacy for the sake of digital literacy. It's these skills are needed. And so the real focus of our work is to teach the skills that people need, with the end being employment, education, and just whatever it means to fully participate in daily life. And people say, well, when did you get involved in digital literacy? And I'm like, well, I think digital literacy got involved with me, right? We were all minding our own business, and then all of a sudden email came along, and every day there's something new that we have to do digitally. And the same is true for our learners. It just caught us, right? So I'm going to ask you some questions, just have you chat out the answers in the chat box. And so the first one is, share an example of when the first time you remember needing digital literacy skills in order to do your job, in order to go through life. Was there a specific situation like your office got email, or what was it? Go ahead and chat those things out. For me, it was the email piece. And we got a database to keep track of our volunteers to replace the index card system that we had honed for 20 years. Word perfect. Oh my gosh, I haven't said word perfect in a long time. The library, remember when the card catalog went from the card catalog to the computer? That was a big jump for a lot of people. Emails, calendars. Miss those card catalogs. This one kind of outs people's age, because sometimes I'll get, well, I was in college and I had to do word processing, and other people will say, well, in preschool, I had to use the smart board to sign in. So kind of lets me know how old people are. Someone not liking the card catalogs. All right, I'm going to ask you a variation of this question. And that is, was there a situation where recently you suddenly had to use digital literacy when before you didn't? So what was a recent example of that? And I just got my COVID vaccine booster on Monday, and the number of websites that I had to go through in order to make that happen was really quite surprising. And there was no phone number to be found for any of that. So what are some of the examples for you? Telehealth, QR codes. Yeah. What happened to the menu? Any other recent examples? QR codes were like a thing, and then they disappeared, and now they have come back with a vengeance. I think somebody found better ways to use them. A lot of QR codes. Zoom meetings, yep. Yeah, I'm terrified of that kiosk for making your bag tag and logging in and everything. It's like, I just want to talk to the nice person behind the counter. My favorite response to this question, someone shared that his mom called and said, "Can you come over and help me with my computer?" And he said, "Sure, what's up?" And she said, "Well, I just bought a coffee maker and I need to install the app on my phone." And I'm like, wow, in order to make coffee, you need an app on your phone. And my last question here is, why do students in your program need to increase their digital literacy skills? What are some of the stories that they're telling or the needs that they're sharing? So we're seeing similar things: health, jobs, helping kids with homework, all of which Northstar has been very responsive to in terms of what they've created. Online banking, definitely. Early during the pandemic, we had a digital navigation program where we had digital navigators working with clients, and we worked with a lot of seniors who needed help using Zoom so that they could interact with their family. And somebody said we should call this all "How Zoom Saved Christmas," because getting them onto Zoom allowed them to interact with their families that first year when we were all encouraged to be separate. All right. Thanks for sharing out. And coworker of mine shared this cartoon. Give you a couple seconds to read it. So maybe a little close to home there in terms of the healthcare stuff. All right, so going back to Northstar, share the mission. What is Northstar? Well, you're probably aware it's a set of assessments to measure digital literacy skills at the basic level, and then educational tools for teaching basic computer skills. Just some bragging statistics: used by 2831 sites in 50 states. We worked really hard to get Montana because we were at 49 for a long time, but 50 was very exciting. Number of assessments as of yesterday, 6.5 million assessments have been taken either on the free site or through a subscription site. Currently totally available in English, and then in the last year, I've been translating it over into Spanish, and currently 5 of the topics are in Spanish, 5 of the assessments, and the remaining topics will be done in early 2023. So people have asked for translation for a long time, and so finally Northstar got the resources to do Spanish. And now people are saying, well, what's the next language you're going to do it in? So in the chat, share out, what do you wish the next language would be? Spanish was kind of obvious, but what's the next language you'd like to see Northstar in? And the reason I ask this question is because the next language isn't obvious. When I was talking to Teresa, I'm like, well, Somali, clearly in the Twin Cities, Somali will be the next language. She goes, yeah, but that's not the case around the country. And so as I ask this question, we get Mandarin a lot. We get all kinds of different languages. And so what the next language will be will depend upon who comes up with the biggest check, I think. But so recognize that there's just lots of requests for lots of different languages. And then it's fully compatible with desktops, laptops, and Chromebooks. When Northstar started, think about your phone. Nobody went to school on their phone. Nobody tried to go to work on their phone. And so Northstar wasn't designed to be useful on the phone, but now we realize that that is the device of choice or the device of necessity for a lot of our students. And so Northstar is working on mobile compatibility. It's happening behind the scenes, should be done again by early 2023. It's probably at the beginning of Northstar, it's probably 80 to 85% mobilely compatible, and the hope to get it is to get it to about 99% mobile compatible. So next slide talks about the history and philosophy. And so it was restarted by request of a local library, Rondo Library, which is about a mile from my house. And it was during the last recession. A lot of people were out of work and they were upskilling. And one of the skills that they were upskilling was digital literacy. And so the library had digital literacy classes, but they didn't have a way to measure the learning, and they didn't have a way of recognizing a person's accomplishments. And so they came to Literacy Minnesota and sort of brainstormed, is there something that could be created that would allow us to assess students' learning, give them certificates if they've accomplished it? And so that was the beginning of Northstar. And, you know, at the beginning, we thought, well, this is just going to be something that the library is interested in. And then we thought, well, this is just something Minnesota is going to be interested in. And we've been delighted to see how it's something that people across the country and across the world are interested in. Northstar was created by a request from the community, and everything that has happened in Northstar has been created by a request from the field. Every unit that has been developed, every component that has been created, every tweak that has been made has been a request from the field. And Northstar is a small team. They don't have $1 billion to do field testing. So what typically happens is they put something out there, and then based on the feedback, they make the tweaks. So I encourage you as Northstar learners to always share feedback with the team. It'd be great if it worked this way. How about if you added this? We would love to see an assessment on this. And that gets added to the list of requests. And then as resources allow, Northstar creates something. And for me, it's fun because I'll do this training and I'll say, no, Northstar doesn't allow self-registration. And then 6 months later, it's like, oh, Northstar created self-registration because libraries ask for it. So again, ask and hopefully you will receive. It is standards-based. So in order to create the assessments, Northstar had to look and create a set of standards. What does it mean to have basic digital literacy skills? I'm going to share those with you in a few minutes. And so everything that Northstar is built on it's all built on those standards. They underlie everything. We know that ABE programs live by the CCR standards too, right? And so Northstar has worked to align the Northstar curriculum, the Northstar resources to those CCR standards. And I'll show that a little bit later. And we have a third set of standards we use in Minnesota called the TIF or ACES standards, which look at those life skills. And so Northstar aligns with those as well, particularly in the curriculum areas. We say it's accessible, and by that we mean lower level digital literacy skills. Northstar found that there's a lot out there for higher level skills, but not a lot out there for lower level skills. And so that's where the focus is. I had somebody say, well, the assessments don't cover everything. And I'm like, no, there's nothing on how to use pivot tables in the Excel unit. If you're worried about pivot tables, I'm sure you can look at a YouTube video or find another web resource. So this really focuses on lower level skills. It's written at a lower reading level, so about grade 4 reading level. And So lower level, not very beginning, but lower. And then try to keep it as low cost as possible. So the subscription fees that are charged pay for the maintenance and the updating of the site. And then for the big things like translating it to another language, Northstar secures other funding. So try to make it as affordable for programs as possible, because we know nobody really has a lot of money out there. So there are the features: 17 standards, 15 assessments. We now have curricula for all of those. Just finished the last one up this month. There are currently 10 of the 15 online learning units created, and the rest will be done in early 23. And then there is the learner management system, allows you to keep track of students, test information, time on task, things like that. So we're going to start with these standards. And like I said, the standards underpin everything in Northstar. The assessments are built on the standards. The curricula is based on the standards. And so they're important and they're hidden. And so I really wanted to pull them up. And I typically do this only with adult education programs, because librarians go, we don't understand what these are, because we don't teach from standards, whereas people who are doing instruction do. And so I'm going to share these out. So what are standards? Okay, looking at first one. What are the basic skills needed to perform tasks on a computer? Well, Northstar has thought that through for you. And so you don't have to, as an instructor, think about that. Okay, now there's basic computer skills. What's involved in basic computer skills? Well, demonstrating knowledge of keys on a keyboard is a basic computer skill. Okay, and so I'm going to ask you to chat out an answer. What keys other than letters do you commonly use on a computer? So what keys other than letters do you commonly use on the computer? The tab. Good. So Northstar has done that work for you. They thought about what are the standards, and then what are the specific tasks that you need to be able to do. In this case, what keys do you typically need to use? So there's a screen cap of the standards, and I will share out a link to them. So I know that is impossible to read, but just gives you an idea of what they look like. So I'm going to give you a task, and that is click on the link that I have just put in the chat. So if you could go ahead, open up that link, and then say, got it, in the chat if you were able to get it. And if you're stuck, type stuck. Looks like people got it. So now you have it in your web browser. So I encourage you to save that, download it. In Minnesota, this is one of the sets of standards that we use to inform instruction. And so teachers base their instruction off of this. Lots of them use Northstar, others create their own materials, but these are the basic standards. So what I'd like you to do, and you can see the directions in the chat, is look at the standards and then go and find what unit or what assessment module and what is the standard number addressing demonstrating knowledge of keys on a keyboard. So that's the first question. And then the second is, what is one standard listed for Google Drive? And Google Drive is one of those where we have the standards, but not the assessment yet. So, and then when you found the answers to those, go ahead, send me a private chat. So change to everyone to Rob Polosic and send me the answers. Give you a few minutes to do that. All right, looks like most people have responded, so we'll go ahead and move on. Again, just wanted to explicitly share out those standards with you so that you have them. Really explain the underpinnings of Northstar. All right, let's talk next about the assessments. Northstar used to be called Northstar Digital Literacy Assessments because that was the main product, that was the main tool, and in many ways, it still is. So Northstar has a series, as I said, of 15 assessments, and they're listed on the screen. The ones in red are the ones that are currently available in Spanish. or excuse me, in red are in Spanish, and that will be, the screen will be getting redder and redder as we move forward. Usually I have a little thing here that says coming next, but there isn't an assessment that is in the pipeline yet, working on the translation, working on mobile compatibility. So I don't know what the next assessments will be. It might be the Google products. It might be more healthcare related units, depends upon where the funding and the demand is. So we kind of arbitrarily put them into 3 buckets: essential computer skills, essential software, and using technology in daily life. And users can take the assessments in any order, so you can pick and choose what's most important for you. It is nice to do those first 3 first. So basic computer skills, internet basic, and using email. And so we very frequently have those be the first 3 assessments that people take. Okay. It seems logical to do basic computer skills first, and that is sometimes the case, but a lot of our staff has reported that doing the email unit first is sometimes easier for people because they do email all the time, so they know how to do it, but they might not know what something on the computer is called, which is what the first unit is. So again, first 3 are the first 3. I would really encourage you to administer those before the rest. Then which ones you give depends on what your students are interested in. Obviously, Windows or Mac. People don't usually take both of those, depends upon what their computer is. Essential software depends on their need. I had somebody say, well, my students never need PowerPoint. And I'm like, well, then don't have them take the PowerPoint assessment. You don't have to take any of the units. It's only if it's something of interest to you. And then the using technology in daily life, these units are harder. They tend to have a lot more language, and they tend to have a lot more critical thinking. So the basic computer skills might say, click on the power button, whereas information literacy will be, which of these cell phone plans do you think is a better deal? So obviously a little bit more language involved in these. Okay. These are great units to have students take if they're interested in social media. But I found that they're also great for students who want just additional test taking practice or additional practice. I had a student who doesn't have kids, but he wanted to take the supporting K-12 distance learning unit. And it was really fun to have him say, oh, I've never seen this email software, but I know when I use Gmail, this is how you do it. So I'm going to assume this is how you do it in this portal. Great example of digital resilience and being able to take a skill from over here to over here. So just some good additional practice. So with these being a given for the first ones, which of the rest of them are going to be the most interest to your students? Go ahead and chat out what you think are going to be of the most interest to your students. All those listed in red, which is probably why they were the first ones translated into Spanish, because those are the most common ones. So again, answers are all over the place, and that's great. Northstar allows you to pick and choose. So you don't have to go through these in the order that they appear. But again, remembering that the ones in the using technology in daily life tend to be a little bit harder and assume digital literacy skills, whereas the ones in the other columns are easier. So Northstar has an assessment model of pre-test. Okay, so the idea is a student will take an assessment to assess their instructional needs, and then they will get instruction. So that might be instructor-led, so a teacher or a tutor in your program. It might be independent study working through the Northstar online units. It might be them saying, oh, I'm going to go home and ask the person in my family that I ask my digital literacy questions to. They might have the skills to go to a YouTube video or other web resource, but somehow after they get that pre-test, figure out what they know and don't know. Then they'll do some instruction, and then they will post-test to measure that learning. And if they have gotten a high enough score, earn the certificate and move on to the next unit, or say, well, I need to do some additional study and go back and review that content. Okay, so pre-test, instruction, post-test. Northstar only has one assessment per topic. So there's not a separate pre-test and post-test. So really important that you give the pre-test and then you just don't have them keep taking that test over and over and over again until they've memorized the answers. Put the assessment aside, work on the other resources, and then come back to the assessment. Okay, so maybe someday there'll be a second post-test, but at this point and for the near future, there isn't. So in the chat out, how many of you have taken a Northstar assessment? Just chat out yes or no. All right, looks like the no's are pacing the yeses. We got a not yet, which means not until Rob has us take a sample assessment. So I know you'd love to listen to me talk for another 10 minutes, but I think it's more valuable to have you just go out and get into one of the assessments. So what I'm going to do is get out of, and I'm going to go to the Northstar website, which is digitalliteracyassessment.org. And this is our public website. And the assessments are available to anybody. You don't have to have a subscription in order to take an assessment. And so that's why 6.5 million people have taken them, because they can just go to our website and take an assessment. So here's the main page. I'm going to scroll down. And there is a tab that says Build Your Skills. Whoop, there it is. There are the 15 assessments in those buckets. And so somebody can come and just click on whatever assessment they would like to take. So I am going to chat out the link to the Northstar page. Once you get there, I clicked on the wrong button. You're going to click on Take an Assessment. How logical is that? It's going to scroll you down. And I would like you can pick any of the 15 assessments to take this morning. So I'm going to give you about 10 minutes just to get into it and get a feeling for what they're like. See if you want to start with the basic computer skills, you can. Otherwise, pick any others. If you are having trouble getting into the assessments, send me a chat and I'll help you out the best I can. But go in and play with the assessments, and then we'll come back and talk about them. All right, I'm going to start pulling you back. If you could come back to the main room and chat out which assessment you looked at. So somebody took us Excel. What else did you look at? I can't encourage you enough to, as part of your Northstar journey, just get in there and take those assessments yourself. You'll get an idea of what they look like and how they work. There would be a little bit of assessment of your digital literacy knowledge, and maybe you might have some gaps. Typically find some gaps around vocabulary. There is a question that talks about the ribbon. Point to the ribbon, click on the ribbon. And that question comes up in about 4 of the units. And I have gone through that with many, many students. And yet I would not bet any money that I could answer that question correctly. It just stumps me. And somebody else, Anna pointed out, ribbon got me. Yep, gets me all the time too. So just good to go through. Also, if you're good at these skills, that's great. But going through the assessment really gets you thinking about what are those basic tasks that we need to have our students to look at. I'm having fun going through them in Spanish because I'm realizing what's the difference between the language and the digital literacy knowledge, and how much can I intuit even though I don't speak the language. So really, best suggestion is to go through them yourself. You can go through the main website and take the assessments. In the chat, share out 1 or 2 reactions you had as you went through those assessments. What were you thinking other than, I don't know what the ribbon is? What were you thinking as you did those assessments? So Terry says more challenging than expected. They can only go down so low. So sometimes people say, well, my student has no digital literacy skills, they can't take the assessment. Well, it's hard to take an online assessment if you don't have the skills. And so again, they are more challenging for some students. It's interactive. Again, I think some people are like, well, that's not the way I open a window or I close a window. Again, multiple ways to do something. Northstar had to pick one. If your student already knows it a different way, then you're going to have that conversation about there are multiple ways of doing it. That is a very good digital literacy skill to know that there are multiple ways to do things. So that might be something that you need to go through with students. All right. We're going to look a lot more at the assessments in the 3rd session and really talk about how you can hold a student's hand through the assessment taking process the first time. Did anyone get to their results page? And didn't give you a whole lot of time, so you might not have gotten to the results page. But at the end of an assessment, when you hit submit, you will get this results page, and a little bit cut off here. It'll tell you your passing score. The passing score in Northstar is 85%. So this student just snuck by. And then you'll see below the correct and incorrect. And really want to point out, get this question all the time. These are not questions correct and questions incorrect. These are standards that were correct or incorrect. So standard number 1 was correct. That doesn't mean that was asked in question number 1. Or more importantly, standard number 5 was incorrect. It doesn't mean that they got question number 5 wrong. It just means that they got whatever question talked about standard number 5 wrong. And that's really important. Northstar has done everything that they can to get people to just not memorize the questions, right? And so it's like, oh, I got question 5 wrong. I'm going to go back and memorize the answer to that. They've made it a little bit more difficult. So this results page is available at the end. And is there one question per standard? Nope. Some questions have more than one standard embedded in them, and some standards are spread across a couple questions. And so it's not a one-to-one correspondence, which makes it harder to game the system, but provides more valid assessment results. And then if you get your passing score of 85%, you're eligible for a certificate. And there is an example of a student with the certificates. And we love certificates, right? We all love those quick wins. So students really appreciate getting the Northstar certificates. We found that Northstar assessments are a great way to give students a relatively quick win. Like if I have a student who's working to get their GED, that's going to be a long process, but maybe they can get a basic computer skills certificate more quickly. And so that is a quick win, and success breeds success, and having those quick wins encourages people to hang in there. I'll show the story. I had a student who he had passed all 15 assessments, and then he lost their certificate, and he moved, and he asked if I could print out all 15 certificates because he needed something to hang on the wall in his new place. And so he hung them all up. So they are available for you. If you're connected with a badging system, if that is something that your program or your world uses, you can also earn badges by passing the certificates or passing the assessments. So I'm going to pause for a quick second and ask what questions you have about the assessments, now that you've had a little chance to jump in and play with them. So nice comment about the ease of use. Try to make them as easy as possible. Again, if you would find a way of doing it that makes it easier, share that with Northstar. Anything that helps navigate more easily is something really valuable to know. Are there time limits? There are not official Northstar time limits, so the students can take as long as they want. We found a lot of programs impose time limits because they want to give their students a chance to practice taking a timed assessment. And this is a low risk time assessment. So officially, there are no timings. Your program may choose to import one. We found it, we usually tell students it takes about a minute per question. Is there a place where they can review the terminology or the vocabulary from the test? That's built into the curricula, which we'll talk about in a minute. It's also built into the Northstar online learning units. Okay. You can also teach them to Google a word and find a meaning that way. So there's a good digital literacy skill. All right, as I said, we'll revisit the assessments again in session 3, but if you have the opportunity to go through and take them as good experience. So we've done the assessment. Now there's the instruction piece. And so Northstar has 2 instructional resources. First is the instructor-led curriculum, and that might be a paid teacher, it might be a volunteer tutor, but somebody who would guide a student or a group of students through the instruction. And then there is the self-directed online learning modules where students can work their way through on their own or go through those modules with a teacher or tutor. Just curious, in your programming, how are you going to provide instruction, or how are you envisioning providing instruction? Is it going to be, are you going to have digital literacy classes? Are tutors going to be doing this? Are you going to have the students work independently? What are you thinking for your instructional model? Some of you may not have been thinking about it yet, but if you can, share out what you're thinking. So you got classes, tutor-led small group classes. Some of you are thinking about standalone classes. Some of you are thinking about embedding them into other classes. Both are great. I think about how I can learn a skill. Well, I could watch a YouTube video or learn it independently, but even better than that is to take a class on it. And even better than that is to have a one-on-one tutor who's going to hold my hand through it. So I think the one-on-one instruction or small group instruction is ideal. Classroom instruction is great. And then having those independent study modules is another great opportunity. So I'll talk about the curriculum. This is kind of a boring slide because it used to just highlight which ones we had units created for, but now it's the same slide as the assessment one because we now have curricula designed for all 15 units. Okay. And some features obviously aligned and built on the Northstar standards. Easy to use. And by that, it is all scripted out. So the idea is that a volunteer tutor could pick it up and read through it. Everything that you need in terms of handouts, overheads, things is already created. So it is easy to use. You know, most teachers, like any other curriculum, will pick it up and then make it their own. They'll adapt the recipe to their particular tastes, but you can pick it up and deliver it as written and very effective. Learner-centered interactive, so lots of activities, lots of conversation, lots of opportunities for students to weigh in on what they would like to work on. And then just like the Northstar assessment, you can take them in any order. You can do the lessons in any order. So you can pick and choose based on your particular student. So if I'm working one-on-one, I'll have the student take the assessment, figure out what skills they need, and then go in and pull those units from the lessons. If I'm teaching a class on Word, where everybody's needs are all over the place, then I'll probably just work my way through the Word curriculum so that we cover everyone's needs. Both work well. Just some logistics, 8 lessons per unit. So 8 for using email, 8 for social media. Okay. Looks like about 2 hours per time to complete. Mileage may vary. Some people take longer. Very few people take less time. Some people spread it out over a couple lessons. Depends on how your instructional model looks. Really designed for group instruction, large group or small group instruction. So if you're working one-on-one, you may need to do a little adaptation because the talk to your neighbor activity not going to work that well with one-on-one. So a little bit more work if you're working one-on-one. There was a question, is the curriculum free to us with our membership? Yes. And so that is one of the benefits of having a subscription, is that it is accessible to you. And then, Northstar was designed to be taught in person, and then the pandemic happened, and the Northstar team very quickly looked at the curriculum and made adaptations so that it can be delivered online. I have delivered it more online than in person, and it works very, very well. Okay. And what a great way to learn digital literacy skills than learning them online. Kind of a double bang for your buck there. So the content obviously is different for every lesson, but the routine is exactly the same. We know the importance of routines for students. We know the value of routines for instructors. So every lesson will have these components. There'll be a warm-up, which is a little mini assessment. What do you know about this topic? What's your understanding of this vocabulary, and so forth. A review of the objectives, with a chance for students to share out, I really want to work on this, or this isn't important to me. And then it follows explicit instruction, direct instruction, I, we, you. So first the teacher will model and explain the concept, and then the teacher and the students will do the tasks together. And then there'll be some independent practice, which is usually some paired work or some small table work. So I, we, you. There is always a task, because if you're going to learn how to do Word, you should do a task involving using Word, right? And so there'll be some type of task or activity where the student has to apply those skills. There'll be a little wrap up, which will be a little post test, a little what did you learn today, a little exit ticket activity. And then there's always a lot of work on vocabulary, because as with all of us, I may know what that button does, but I have no idea what that button is called. And so lots of emphasis on the vocabulary. And then here is a screen cap of one of the lessons, internet privacy. So always have the standards that are being covered in that lesson pulled out by number. It'll pull out the vocabulary that is being covered. Incognito, there's a good vocabulary word. Any technology concepts? Any prep work? And all of the handouts and materials that you need are linked with hyperlinks. And then here's an example of how it's scripted out. And then another screen cap of the directions for that first part, the model and explain. And again, all scripted out. Those of you who remember Laubach way to reading, bringing back some memories there of having a lesson, have a curriculum where it's all laid out for you. In session 2, we'll go to the live site and dig through the curriculum and just show you how to maneuver your way through. But this, again, is meant to be the overview piece. So pause for a second again. What questions do you have about the curriculum? The lag time for questions to get from Wisconsin to Minnesota takes a while, so pause here.
Rob, this is Jamie. I just wanted to mention that I was looking at the telehealth curriculum the other day, and one of the lessons, the feedback that I got from it was really lengthy, like it was almost a 2-hour lesson. But I wanted to reiterate that Northstar is recommending that you can take that in chunks, right? Like that you can adapt that or do it over several meetings.
Yep. You can just break it in half. You can pull out chunks that you want to make it shorter. So yeah. Do you know what grade level it's written at? 4th grade level is usually the stat that we give. I have a slide. I think it's in the next presentation with a bunch of descriptors of that level. It really does focus on doing the skills on computers, but there are lessons on how to do tablets and smartphone things and so forth. Someday there'll probably be a whole assessment on smartphones, I think, because they're so ubiquitous anymore. I think that's one of the places where instructors need to talk about that transference of skill and say, okay, this is how it works on your computer, but this is how it works on your cell phone. This is how it works on your laptop. And that's just, that resiliency is it's just such an important skill. It's like, I know how to drive my Tacoma pickup, but I also need to know how to drive another type of car, even though they're slightly different. And so even if the lessons don't directly address that, I think it's important for teachers to talk about how does this transfer to the student's particular device. Oh, there's an example of the handouts. And we're actually going to do that unit in the last session, so a little preview. So Northstar online learning modules. And I have the 10 up there that are created. I realized that I didn't update this slide because there should be one more in red. So Windows is also available in Spanish. So these are the ones that are created. Mac is set to come shortly. And then Northstar has dedicated some resources to getting all of the units done. Okay. So Northstar Online units are units where students can go in and independently work their way through the content. And so they would log in and then they would just do the activities, watch the videos, answer the questions, take the mini assessments and so forth. So it's just a little asynchronous class that students can move their way through. And some students have the skills to access it and work their way through on their own. Other students need a little bit more hand holding. And so they work through it with a tutor or as part of a class. And in the 3rd session, we are going to give you a chance to dig in and work your way through those units yourself. But just some screen caps of what they look like. So there might be a page of text. And if there's ever words on the page, it is always narrated. So either narrated in English, narrated in Spanish. So you'd read this and listen to the recording. And then there are some activities. So after they've been taught a concept, they'll be given a little mini assessment, like click on the desktop or the tower or whatever vocabulary Northstar uses. Okay. And then again, here's an example of a question. There's a flash drive, click on the port that matches it. And if they click on it, it says good job. If they don't, if they get the wrong one, it will tell them the answer. So give them a little instruction. And then here's the example of the page that you would go through, and you can just go through them in order. It is also tied to assessment results. So if I look at my result for a particular assessment, it's going to tell me and direct me directly to the units for that topic, for that standard. And again, we will dig into these when we get to the third session. Okay. Another example of a question. And here's an example how it's tied to the standards page. So if I look at my standard results, here are the ones that I got wrong. And then I can just click on this dumbbell, which takes me to the lesson for that topic. And the nice thing about the Northstar Online units is students can do them over and over again. You know, you have those students who want to do the same thing over and over and over and over again. And we say, don't take the assessments over and over and over again. But for the Northstar Online units, I'm like, yeah, go through that unit again and again and again. And you can sit at home and repeat the lesson as many times as you want to. No limit there. All right, and then we're going to wrap up talking about the learner management system. Part of having a subscription is that you get a learner management system. And so this will keep track of all the assessments that are taken, all the students that you have entered in, and you can get results, you can get reports and so forth from there. So again, the two big ones are just keeping track of those assessments, track of those students, and then pulling out the reports that you might want or need. And those reports might be, I need to figure out how this group of students scored on their assessment so I can plan instruction for that. Or it might be, I need a record of how many assessments have been taken this month so I can report it to my boss and our funder. Thinking about assessment data, what would you like to pull out of Northstar? What kind of report data would you like to pull out of Northstar? So in the chat, share out what information would be most interesting for you. Yes, it does keep track of time on task, or keep track of the number of hours spent. We'll talk about that next time. Definitely keeps track of number of learners, modules taken, students passed. So just quickly show you a couple screen caps of some of the more common reports. This is the most basic: how many learners, how many users, how many hours, how many assessments were passed, what's the passing rate. And this will default to for all time, and you can filter it out for the month, which is probably more useful, or for the program year. And we'll look at that next time. This is the information by student, so I can look at a particular student like Rob as student, and this gives me an idea of what assessments have been taken and passed and what ones haven't been taken. So that's useful for providing guidance for instruction. Here's an example of the assessments. And so here's the person who took the assessment, what module it was, what they're 0 of 17. If they pass, nope. So you can sort by assessments. And then this is looking at which questions were most answered, which questions were least answered. So this is really useful. If I give a group of 5 students in my class the assessment, I can look at this information and figure out what topics do I need to emphasize in my teaching and what topics can I not spend as much time on. All right, so we are going to wrap things up here and we're going to do a quick exit ticket activity. So what I'd like you to do in the chat is share out what is one thing that you learned today, and what is one question that you still have. So common exit ticket activity, do with students all the time. What's one thing you learned today and what's one question that you still have? And Jamie, as people are winding up, if you could share out logistics, like what's the time and day for next week, just to make sure everyone is on the same page.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. This was great, and I loved how interactive this training was. We are meeting again, same time, same place, I believe. And by place, I just mean Zoom. So next Wednesday, let me double check my calendar.
I think it's in the afternoon next week.
Oh,
and that is why I asked that question, because I'm like, am I
yeah.
confused?
Thank you. I shut down all of my calendars so they wouldn't ding in the middle of this training. So double checking, you're right. So it is a different time. We are at 1 o'clock next Wednesday, the 14th. So 1 to 2:30 is our second training. Our third one doesn't happen until January.
And in the same time zone, so that makes life easier.
Right. And as I mentioned, we are recording. So I will be sending out this recording to anybody who registered for this meeting, as well as my list of Northstar administrators.
And Jamie, I'll send you the slides.
Oh, great.
And then you can forward them out as appropriate.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Have a great week. See you next Wednesday.